and get started now. I'd like to welcome everyone to our June webinar on vocational rehabilitation works for you and your quality of life. I encourage everyone to make sure your phone lines are muted by hitting *6. I just had lost my connectivity here for a second. Hillary, could you advance to the next slide for me, please? Thank you.
Sure.
So, thanks. Before we get started, just a couple of reminders. Your phone lines will be muted. You can unmute by hitting #6 at the end of the presentation to ask any questions, and then mute back by hitting *6. You can also ask questions or put comments in the chat box. And in about a week, you will be receiving the link to the recording and the slides by email. And at the end of this program, we encourage you to fill out the brief feedback form. It gives us information both in terms of planning the future of webinars and newsletter articles, and it helps us to know just what your needs are going forward. So we always appreciate if you can do that. That would be great. Next slide, please. Thank you. I am so happy to announce that today's presenter, Elizabeth Jones, is with us. I've had the pleasure of meeting her basically as a member of our Dialysis Patient Citizens Education Center Advisory Council. She's been a member with us for a number of years now. She's a master level social worker. She's a licensed social worker. She's been in nephrology for over 28 years. She's also a fellow of the NKF, the National Kidney Foundation, which is an honor given to a select group of people who volunteer with NKF and who are very involved in the renal community. She's also the co-chair for their spring clinical meeting that will be happening next year. So this is another example of how she is involved and stays involved in what she's doing and believes in with the organization. She's also the lead social worker for DaVita in the Northern Virginia, D.C., and Maryland area, and works at the Sterling and Ashburn, Virginia dialysis clinics with hemodialysis patients. As I said, she serves on our advisory council, and she has been very involved and instrumental in the whole field of vocational rehabilitation, and she has a lot of information to share, and you will see a lot of resources on her slides that, as I once you get them next week, you'll be able to link to a number of great places. So at this point, Elizabeth, I'm going to turn the program over to you, and feel free to share anything else that you like and take it away.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Kathy. I'm so happy to be speaking to this group today. It's a group that's very near and dear to my heart. And just a little bit about me. I applied at a large hospital to be a social worker 28 years ago. And during my pre-employment physical, I was found to have a chronic kidney disease. So that was very shocking for me. And then just as a twist of fate, or whatever you might want to call it, I was assigned 3 days later to work as a renal and endocrine social worker in this large 1,500-bed hospital. So I got a crash course in renal personally and professionally, and it's been a journey for me over the past 28 years. I decided at one point to go work for a group of 5 doctors in their dialysis center as their social worker after I left the hospital, and I enjoyed doing that. They sold to a corporation, which merged to another corporation, which now is the LDO, or Large Dialysis Organization, I currently work for. I do try to remain fairly active in the renal community. I encourage all of you to do that. It's been great professionally and personally, and I've, for 28 years, been able to stay on the CKD side and not have to progress to dialysis. I did have a primary care physician in the beginning tell me to eat whatever I wanted because I wouldn't be able to do that for very long. So sometimes I know there's a lot of misinformation out there too, so I just encourage you to learn everything you can and do the best you can to follow whatever regimen your nephrologist or doctor is having you on, and you can do well no matter what type of treatment or what stage you are in for a long time. So moving on, we're going to talk about vocational rehabilitation today, which is one of my passions. 28 years ago, when I was diagnosed with kidney disease and I started working as a nephrology or renal social worker, I pretty much decided I need to practice what I preach. So I have worked through numerous comorbid conditions, including cancer, open heart surgery, kidney disease, and other things. So, you know, it's something I've personally gone through. If you ever have any questions after this, I'm happy to speak with you. You can email me at ejones@davita.com or go through DPC and they can contact me. Sometimes I get a little busy, but I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Okay. So first of all, I thought we'd talk about some employment rates among patients on dialysis. And a study by Muir, Chattel, Witten, and al. In 2011 found that 71% of working-age dialysis patients were unemployed. And almost two-thirds of those patients actually quit before they even started dialysis. And just life-changing events for kidney patients are highest in their first 6 to 12 months of being on dialysis. So that's just something to think about. Another study by Kutner and al. showed that patients that stop working and aren't active in some level, whether it's volunteering, working, in school, or anything like that, they tend to have higher rates of depression. They're more likely to be ill and be hospitalized and actually die, which is terrible. And then patients that remain active or become active again are more likely to be transplanted and have better income and insurance. So patients that remain active or work have 21% lower incidence of reported depression, and they're twice as likely to be listed for a transplant and then to actually receive the transplant. So I think that's a pretty significant fact, that you're more likely to be listed for a transplant and actually receive a transplant if you remain active. And you're going to have a higher income because Social Security disability income typically replaces 30 to 40% of your income, and you're going to have improved insurance through work or someone in your family's work, and that's going to give access to specialists and coverage for everyone. Another study by Curtin showed 359 dialysis patients, 85 of them were employed, and 274 were unemployed. So you're seeing the large number that either stop before they get to dialysis or then within the first 6 months, and then it keeps dropping off, stop working or stop becoming active and vocationally. So they were surveyed to see what was going on with them. A lot of them felt that they couldn't work, and it seemed to become a self-fulfilling prophecy. And 21% of them reported that they were both able to and wanted to return to work. So when we're working with our patients, if you're a professional on this call, or if you're a patient advocate on this call, or a caregiver, when we're all working together with each other, what are we saying to each other? Are we encouraging people to do what they want, ask what their goals are, and have the highest level of functioning and the best life you can with kidney disease? Or are we saying, oh, you know, poor thing, it's okay, you know, you can apply for disability, you can go home. So I think the more positive we are, and there's a cognitive concept called positive expectancy, and if we're practicing that and we're talking to each other with that, results usually are improved and people feel better and do better with living with kidney disease. We want our physicians and our other team members to know that you have an interest in work or being active and help support that to whatever level. So that might involve assessing where your access goes or what type of treatment modality a patient's going to be on, and just you know, what shift. So there's centers that have later shifts, there's centers that have early shifts, there's nocturnal dialysis, there's home hemodialysis, there's peritoneal dialysis. So there's lots of different treatment options for patients and professionals to also work in those settings, and to let the patients know if something's not working, maybe we can try something else. So the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services has conditions for coverage that all of the providers follow in the dialysis setting, and they have V tags under these. And the one that applies to vocational rehabilitation is V tag 555. And for pediatric patients, it's making sure that we're working with the patients and their families to make sure their formal education needs are met. And for adults, that the vocational and physical rehabilitation referrals as indicated. So it's to the activity desired by the patient is how CMS puts it. So that's one of the mandates that dialysis centers and professionals are charged with from CMS. I'm hearing a little background noise. Not sure. Okay. So social workers provide counseling to help patients overcome internal barriers. So this is a study that was done using symptom-targeted intervention, which was developed by Melissa McCool, who's a social worker who worked in dialysis and now I think has her own practice. And we just wanted to see if we use these cognitive behavioral techniques with patients, would it improve their functioning and their vocational activity? Okay. So we helped the patients with internal and external barriers and referrals, and just the social workers are qualified to help the patients with that. So we used different cognitive behavioral techniques, and we did see an improvement in the patient's vocational activity by giving that. There's another study by Hughes et al. That had a small sample study of 20 patients who received telephonic peer support. So that's something patients can do with patients. And patients that received that support felt overwhelmingly positive about their experience, and it really helped them set their goals and have a hope for the future. So just think about peer support in your setting, wherever you are, whether it's a dialysis center or a home dialysis program or a patient group, and what that might look like. How could peer support benefit others? So as patients, we want you to think about all your options and maybe talk to your human resources about what that might be. And as we've just heard, there are many benefits to remaining active while you're on dialysis. And studies are showing that patients who maintain employment generally feel better and experience less depression, don't get sick or hospitalized as often, and are more likely to receive a kidney transplant. More importantly, I think working and remaining active helps patients stay connected to the people they love and the world around them. And in general, it provides the best income to maintain an active lifestyle and plan for your future and your family's future. And then it gives you a sense of identity and self-worth. And then when other things are outside of your control, sometimes like going to work, I know for me personally it's been this way, it's like I can go to work and I don't really have to think about some other things that are maybe going on with my health, and it's just a good balance in my life. But I know working can be challenging sometimes for patients depending on different things that are going on in their life. So there's a whole team that works with everyone in the chronic kidney disease world. You have your family, friends, and coworkers, or if you're working, or your family members' coworkers, social workers, dietitians, nurses, or PCTs, or patient care technicians, physicians, and you have your human resources departments at the places where you work are very knowledgeable and very helpful. The Department of Labor has an incredible website with all kinds of resources and information, and we'll be talking a little bit more about that. And all this can really help you think about it and face the barriers and help make decisions that may be beneficial to improve your quality of life. And I know sometimes it might be difficult, like interviewing can be difficult because you may have gaps in your resume from being ill. So there's things you can look at with that, with putting volunteer experience in or other things in there, or just shaping your resume in a certain way. Then also, if you don't make urine and they want you to take a drug test, that can be a little uncomfortable. So you may have to talk to the Human Resources Office and say, hey, I can't take a urine test, but I can take a blood test. So just things like that to think about. So sometimes patients may not feel well when they start dialysis, and then over time you may feel improved once we're managing the your lab work and getting the toxins out of you. So just like using short-term disability benefits or vacation or long-term disability, maybe options that you have and things to look into. And just maybe not returning right away back to full-time employment, maybe returning to part-time employment or going down a little bit in your hours. I've done that over the years. Sometimes I've gone down in hours and I've gone back up in hours. So that's definitely doable. Next, I wanted to review some legislation that impacts work rights, and especially with dialysis patient citizens being an advocacy group, I wanted to include the years that these laws and acts were passed, just so you can think about all the advocacy that went into them. And Kathy, I was talking to her yesterday, and she said, you know, and sometimes there needs to be additional advocacy, which she's exactly right about that, to sometimes these laws and bills have been amended, and sometimes we just need to advocate so they don't get repealed, or we need to have them advanced to meet the modern times, because maybe something in them is dated. So just things to think about with that. The Rehabilitation Act of 1973 was the first major legislative effort to secure an equal playing field for individuals with disabilities. This legislation provides a wide range of services for persons with and continued employment and the pursuit of independent living, self-determination, and inclusion in American society. So that's the goals they wanted for this back then. And basically, it bans discrimination for anyone who works for the government or anyone who contracts with the federal government or anyone who receives any federal funds. So that covers a large amount of employers. It also has special provisions in there for veterans. It's been amended at least 2 times to be more inclusive and include the Postal Service. So it's just a great law that came into effect in the beginning to help start leveling the playing field for people with disabilities. The next one I think of that came along was the American with Disabilities Act, or ADA, and that was in 1990. So if you work for an employer that has at least 15 employees, they must provide you with a reasonable accommodation unless it would be too much of a burden for them. So in an interview, someone can ask you if you need one, but they cannot ask you if you have a disability. If you have concerns, you can speak to the EEOC, or Equal Employment Opportunities Commission, or the Disability Rights Education and Defense Fund, or JAN, the Job Accommodation Network. And JAN is great because JAN will provide some individual counseling. They also have sample letters for actually asking for the accommodation, so it's a really great thing. You can also talk to your supervisor at work or a human resources representative, and then other individuals that might be applicable. So these are some examples of reasonable accommodations. Parking close to the building might be something. You know, sometimes parking is further away, or there might be issues with having to use a shuttle bus. Having a work area you're able to get into. Having an area where you can do your peritoneal dialysis if you have to do an exchange during the day. Restrooms that are accessible. And then also modified work schedules, unpaid leave, reassigning some non-essential tasks, and reassignments to a vacant position. Personally, I have a visual impairment, so I have a reasonable accommodation of a large screen monitor. That really helps me be able to see and do my work. So there's different things. I've had patients over the years have elevated shoes, back braces, and probably could think of a lot of more different examples. But just things that would make it easier for you to work and make your work possible to the highest quality it can be. The next law is the Family Medical Leave Act of 1993, and this is the one I find most beneficial in my work with my patients. Almost every patient I have that's working, they bring this paperwork in, and the doctor assists with filling it out, or the nurse practitioner, and signs it. and it allows the patients to have up to 12 weeks of unpaid job protective leave each year. Now, your employer can require you to use a vacation time for it, but they don't have to. It depends on the employer. And you have to work for the employer at least a year and 1,250 hours over the last 12 months. But the 12 weeks can be intermittent. So it can be like if you have to be hospitalized for a week, that could be one of the 12 weeks, and that protects your job. Just by your, your doctor assisting with you and signing this paperwork. I have patients that it's filled out for. I have patient spouses or significant others that it's filled out for that they bring into our doctors. And then also sometimes patients' parents, even if they're an adult patient, because it might be your mother who's going to drive you to the access appointment, and maybe she works and she's protecting her job, or your spouse is protecting their job. So it's a fantastic act, and I think I would highly encourage you, if you're working or if someone in your family is working, to consider asking about receiving the paperwork from your Human Resources office and then bringing it in to your physician and discussing completing it and why it's important for you and your family to protect your job or your family member's job. So employers have to maintain your group health insurance coverage during this, which is very beneficial for you. And when you return, they must reinstate you to the same position or an equivalent position with the same pay and benefits and working conditions. Now, they can require information from a healthcare provider about your fitness to return to work. And I know our physicians a lot of times will put, able to return to work when and how many hours and whatever, is deemed medically appropriate. The next act is the COBRA, which you may have heard of, the Consolidated Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act of 1985. And this allows individuals to keep their group health insurance or private insurance if they stop working, as long as they work for an employer that had 20 or more employees. And you can't be fired or terminated for gross misconduct, but if you were just stopped working because you weren't able to, because of your health, or your working hours are reduced, or you've had other life-changing events, you can apply for COBRA. And you apply for COBRA through your Human Resources office, typically at your place of employment or former place of employment. So with COBRA, your employer has 30 days to send you the information, and you have 60 days to complete it and respond to it, and then 45 days from whatever date you elect it to make a payment for that. And for some patients, the American Kidney Fund may be able to assist you with premiums. That's a great resource in the community that we have in the renal world. So you maybe want to be able to ask your dialysis center or your social worker if you have COBRA, or if your insurance premium is high and it's a struggle for you, do you qualify for assistance with premiums? So your COBRA is identical to your employer plan. The only glitch I ever see with COBRA is sometimes right when you stop working, they'll cut your medication coverage off right away until all the COBRA gets back into place. So you may want to fill your medications right before you stop working, or spouse stops working if you're thinking about COBRA, if you're able to, if you have that foresight or that knowledge ahead of time. So COBRA plans usually last 18 to 36 months. There's some rules, and there's a possible 11-month extension if you have disability. And just the Department of Labor website has fantastic information about this. Short-term disability is another benefit CKD or kidney disease patients typically use when they're having surgeries or other concerns. Short-term disability provides payments to replace a portion of your income, and it depends whether it was taken out pre-tax or post-tax from your check, whether or not it has to be taxed. So that might be something so you know what your short-term disability amount might be if you have to go out. You should check with your Human Resources to see if it's being taken out pre-tax or post-tax, and then you'll kind of have more of a ballpark on what the amount would be that you're going to receive. And then after you've been on leave a certain amount of time, it's usually what the policies state, and they usually go for approximately 6 months to 1 year, depending on the coverage plan. Long-term disability would be once you've gone through short disability, if you weren't able to return to work at that point, and then, or at the expiration of a sick leave, then you would be able to continue with the long-term disability if your plan offered that. So you want to talk to your human resources about that. The only thing with long-term disability is most of the plans are written nowadays. So if you're getting Social Security disability, once you start getting that, your long-term disability reduces by that amount. So you still end up just getting the total amount of what long-term disability was. That you don't get that with the Social Security. Okay. So I just wanted to review some resources that may be found beneficial for individuals with chronic kidney disease and health issues. If you're feeling tired, your energy is low, possibly due to anemia, uremia, or just a multitude of medical conditions that patients may experience or surgeries, you can talk to the EEOC if you feel you've been discriminated against. I actually had a patient who was terminated from his employment, a home dialysis patient, and it didn't really seem like there was a real reason for it. So he went to the EEOC, and they said they were looking for a case like his because he was a good employee. He always had good reviews. And he actually, they took his case, they took it to court. He was given back pay and reinstated into his job. So the EEOC is truly wonderful with a lot of resources. Ask Jan, as I said before, has a lot of good letters and templates, and they will actually coach you and different work adjustments you may find helpful. And then they also have an employee's guide to negotiating and requesting reasonable accommodations, which may give you some ideas, and writing letters. And then there's another really great book by Life Options. It's a kidney patient's guide to working and paying for treatment. And page 42 through 52 actually give tips on how to keep your job with kidney disease. And page 106 through 107 have some sample physician letters that may benefit you to work with your physician to keep you vocationally active. If a patient feels possibly that, I have a disability, I don't think I'm good enough, which hopefully you don't. You are good enough. You're wonderful. There's an employer's guide to ESRD to explain kidney disease and a person's ability to work. You can use that with your employer. The Department of Labor has a return to work toolkit, and the ODEP, or Office of Disability Employment Policy, actually has information on tax incentives. So if you have a disability, sometimes your employer can get tax incentives. So you may look really great for that. So that's just something you could bring to the table if you feel that's appropriate. Workplace challenges, we talked about the EEOC. There's also the National Disability Rights Network that each state has organizations that assist with patients. The American with Disabilities Act National Network has regional centers about rights and employers' obligations. And just belonging to dialysis patient citizens, you guys are doing something incredible. You're in a motivation and support type group resource. There's many in the renal community. I listed some of the more popular ones or ones that I'm aware of here. If I left any off, please let me know. I love to keep updating this. The National Kidney Foundation has tremendous amounts of education on its website. Professionals and patients both have a lot of different areas you can belong in that. And transplant, CKD, dialysis, all different kinds of resources and education and meetings. The American Association of Kidney Patients is another wonderful organization that does a lot of patient advocacy and has a lot of education and a lot of meetings. The Renal Support Network, RSN, is in California based. It's a great organization. It does a lot of telephonic support also, which I find that's a wonderful service they provide. They have a great newsletter. I think right now they have their annual essay contest is open. Each year they look for patients to write essays about motivation and what you've gone through. So you could go to their website if you're interested in possibly entering their essay contest this year or next year. And they're just great to have as a resource and receive their newsletter, which is always filled with positivity and hope. The Kidney and Neurology Foundation of America, KUFA, has education and also has information about scholarships that kidney patients may be eligible for to help continue your education. And, of course, Dialysis Patient Citizens is a wonderful organization with advocacy and education. And the American Kidney Fund, as I briefly mentioned earlier, they're another great organization. They do advocacy, education, and one of their largest benefits, I think, for dialysis patients is some of their financial assistance. They have small funds to help with small needs you may have from time to time. Sometimes, during the first part of the year they have that, but they have this kidney health insurance premium program, which helps pay for dialysis patients' health insurance premiums if they're unable to afford them and they qualify financially for the program. And then working with kidney disease, www.kidney.org has great information about improving your physical strength and just feeling better with kidney disease. And Live Now, Keep Doing What You Work and Love. I just encourage you to go on and watch that. It's a funny and honest perspective from a PD patient about working. So we're going to talk some about work incentives because sometimes it may be difficult navigating that. So Working While Disabled, How Social Security Can Help is a great publication. It talks to you about your earnings and benefits and when you need to report something to Social Security, and also a summary of work incentive programs. And then Ticket to Work is also great. Also, it has career services for disability recipients age 18 to 64 who want to work. And Ticket to Work is different providers that each state have that have benefit counselors that help you get back into the workforce. So this is just a tremendous resource. Section 1619A and 1619B help with individuals who receive Medicaid. And that would, if you have Medicaid and you're concerned about possibly losing some benefits, that's just a great resource for you to look more into. And down here, SSA.gov Disability Research, 1619B Hotmail, you can look into that, and that will give you the information on how you can keep the Medicaid or the and possibly some of the SSI benefits longer. Impairment-related work expenses typically don't count against you, and you can also complete a PASS or a plan to achieve self-support, which would allow you to keep more of your income based on your using your current income for medical needs. And there's ABLE accounts are another way you can set up an account to put money aside for future education and medical needs. There's also a resource for students with disabilities, and expedited reinstatement means if you would have to stop working at any point, you could go right back into your disability benefits without having to do some of the waiting periods you did in the first time. So I like to think of vocational rehabilitation as a whole umbrella or a whole window instead of just an organization. But there are local OVR or Office of Vocational Rehabilitation offices in each state that help people with disabilities get back into the workforce. If you're interested, you can look up the one for your state and talk to them. Sometimes individuals with dialysis report that they have difficulty with the vocational rehabilitation, feeling that they're able to work. So you really need to advocate for yourself and say, hey, I'm really motivated to do this. This is what I want to do. If you're just looking for some more education and you're not really thinking about going back to work, it might be better to look at auditing a class or something else. But with vocational rehabilitation offices, their really goal is to get people back into the workforce. So they're operated by the states, and they have grants that are given by the states for them, and they work with job placement, education, and employers to help get you back into the workforce. And they also have guidance on American with Disabilities Act's regulations. Employment networks are kind of a more of a not utilized resource, or I would call it an underutilized resource. So if you decide you want to do the Ticket to Work program to help you get back to work, you can either use the ADA, or not the ADA, you can either use the Vocational Rehabilitation office, OVR office, or you could use an employment network. And these are organizations that contract with Social Security to provide services such as career planning, job coaching, job placement, and ongoing support and benefits counseling for you. And I've known sometimes people have had employment networks come out and talk when you're having a patient event. So if there's any type of patient event going on or meeting, you may want to, or a dialysis center or a patient picnic, whatever it might be that might be going on, you could ask someone from an employment network to come out and talk about the benefits they have, and this might motivate someone or let you know if this would be for you. This is another underutilized resource of vocational rehabilitation, our workforce development centers. And each state and most counties have these, and they help provide job coaching, and they host hiring events and job fairs and just a lot of great resources. And these are free, and they're available to anyone regardless of your age, income level, disability, or benefit status or profession. So they can really help people with a job search. They can help young people who may not have a lot of experience or maybe or looking for temporary or seasonal work, or individuals that have had maybe gaps in their resume because they've had some illness. And careeronestop.org has tremendous amount of information on the workforce development centers. And you can also just go ahead and click on the second link, and it'll tell you where they are located in your area. Independent living centers are another underutilized resource, and these are non-residential, private, nonprofit, consumer-controlled, community-based organizations, and they provide advocacy for people with all kinds of disabilities, and they just want anyone with a disability to have their maximum potential and to live the best they can. There's 500 of them in the United States, and if you, the link here will tell you where the ones are in your community. So if you're receiving Social Security disability and you decide that you want to go back to work, the trial work period is a 9-month period where you can test your ability to return to work. So during this 9 months, you register with Social Security and you let them know that you'd like to do the trial work period, and you get to keep all of your work income and all of your Social Security disability income for 9 months, regardless of how much income you're getting at work. Then after the trial work period ends, if you're able to continue working, the disability would stop. Now, if for some reason you would have to stop working at some point, you could use expedited reinstatement to get the disability back. And then there's also limits and amounts. If you have your disability and you can't work fully, you're just going to work a little bit, you can work, there's certain amounts you can work and certain dollars you can earn and keep your disability also. And then this is really important too. This is another resource. Section 301 allows individuals in a vocational rehabilitation program keep their Medicare and their SSDI or SSI after medical recovery, such as a transplant. So typically after a transplant, patients will lose their disability within a year and then Medicare at 36 months. So if you enroll in a vocational rehabilitation program before that happens, and you can keep your Medicare at least 93 months after the trial work period ends, and that gives you a lot more time to transition back into the workforce and have insurance or through a family member. And of course, expedited reinstatement would happen if you were unable to return to work and you were had a qualified disability. And SSA.gov has a tremendous amount of information on this, and the links are provided. So with Social Security retirement, and I actually put this in because I was amazed in my work and some of the research I've been able to participate in and quality improvement studies. I was amazed how many individuals past retirement age continue to work or stay active at some level, part-time, full-time, or PRN with their work. So individuals who take Social Security retirement benefits at full retirement age may work and keep all of their Social Security retirement. And then if you do that prior, you have to, certain amounts you can keep, certain amounts will reduce your benefits. But when you reach full retirement age, Social Security will recalculate your benefits. And I believe it's your last 30 years of work is what your Social Security is based on. So if you're able to continue working at a higher rate, it may increase your amount when you're just getting that at the end. So that's just something to think about, too, to have them recalculated if you're working at a higher rate past the normal retirement age. I just wanted to review some resources for patients with specific backgrounds that might be challenging for returning to the workforce or vocational rehabilitation. For ex-offenders, there's some fantastic websites. There's Job for Felons Hub, and the Federal Bureau of Prisons has a summary of business incentives for former inmates. So just like we talked about earlier, people with disability, the employers may be able to get an incentive. Workplaces have incentives to hire former inmates too, and that may be beneficial for someone who's looking for a job. And certain fields are easier to work in than others, but this has great information. And Career One Stop also has an ex-offender section that actually has resources and interviewing guidance and job search advice, which can be very beneficial to someone who's paid their debt to society and now is trying to fully immerse themselves back into society. There's also some fantastic resources for veterans. The Department of Labor has a section for that, as well as the ODEP on veterans. JAN, again, the Job Accommodation Network, VetJobs.com, and Hire Heroes USA. And this last one has workshops and personal coaching, which can help veterans return to the workforce if they're interested. Now, if someone hasn't been employed for a long time, there's New Guide Destinations has a great handbook for job seekers to help you get out of long-term unemployment. And for seniors, AARP has a website that talks about making changes and working after age 50 plus, and they also have some other resources. And for youth, the Office of Disability Employment Policy Youth has, and the Kidney Urology Foundation Scholarship and Awards, we talked about a little bit earlier, has a lot of information there on that. And Social Security has resources to help youth with transition to successful adulthood. For people that are visually impaired, their disability is usually paid at a higher rate. They have some additional organizations that may benefit them with training and school and helping them get back into the workforce. The American Federation for the Blind and the Blind Institute of Technology are both very helpful. The Blind Institute for Technology actually helps with a lot of IT needs and maybe that back into that type of the workforce. The Business Enterprise Program, or BEP, this was really interesting. It was part of the Randolph-Shepard Act of 1936, and FDR signed that in, and it was led by like a blind attorney and some congressmen, and I put this in here because of DPC being a advocacy organization. It granted individuals who were legally blind the authority to operate vending facilities on federal property, so they have first choice on that. So if you're visually impaired and you know someone that is, operating vending machines may be an option or something to consider. Okay. The Foundation for Blindness and the National Federation for the Blind also have a lot of resources and information about rights and employment assistance. And so we're in the modern age now. A lot of us use our devices, our iDevices, our phones, our pads, our tablets, our computers. So here's some resources for you for different career development skills. Net Online. There's also the Labor Market Information Institute and the Department of Labor's Work Opportunity Tax Credit. And that goes more into the tax credit for people from certain groups, and also TANF, or Temporary Aid for Needy Families, food stamp recipients. So, because sometimes you think if you go back to work, it could potentially cut down your food stamps in addition to your Social Security disability or your SSI income. So this would have information that helps protect that. And then online research for job seekers, there is 211.org, which has information about employment, food pantries, and affordable housing, in addition to jobs. Benefits.gov, more for your benefits, and careeronestop.org would help with writing a resume or a thank you letter. And the National Job Bank, you can search jobs by occupation and location. And on the Department of Labor website, they list the unemployment rate in the United States. So periodically I'll go on and look at that, and I'll see, if the unemployment rate's down in a certain area, like it's a good time actually to seek employment. So that might be something to look at too if you're interested. GettingHired.com looks for companies that are committed to hiring people with disabilities, so that can be very helpful. And Hire Disability Solutions is a job placement service, so that can be great for patients. And your library may have some seminars and workshops. You can check with them. And My Skills, My Future helps find job opportunities based on your previous experience and skills. There's an occupational outlook handbook that can help you see what the specific jobs entail and what training or education you might need if you're interested in those. And the Department of Labor also has a training and worker dislocation program section, and also unemployment insurance benefit information. And then Career One Stop can help you if you need to apply for unemployment, and what resources can help you with child care, groceries, and other necessities. And anytime you do apply for unemployment, though, if you just make sure if you're getting disability or when you do get it, you always let Social Security know about any changes in your income so they don't later try and stop some of your benefits unfairly or want money back to them. So this is just some tips and tools for you guys. So polish up your resume and develop your personal pitch. And I think as being part of Dialysis Patient Citizens, this organization, if you come and you advocate, or you go state level, local level, federal level, or whatever you've done with it, a lot of times we talk about, tell me about yourself. So just think about what you want to say in an interview. Think about your 2-minute elevator speech for vocational rehabilitation versus talking to a congressperson. And just think of a couple of things you'd like to improve. A lot of times employers will ask you weaknesses, so just think about what you might want to say those are. You might, maybe I don't feel like I'm as knowledgeable about this, but I'm planning to read this book about it or go to this conference or this seminar about it to learn more skills in that area. So that could be an answer to that type of question. And then you can, if you're going to have a behavioral interview, that's kind of one of the more common terms you're hearing nowadays with employers is behavioral-based interviewing. So companies want to know how you can perform when you're faced with obstacles. So just think about how you would answer that question. Like, how would you handle a consumer who is displeased with the service? Or if you've had that situation in the past, how have you handled that? And if you're interviewing for a job, it's really great for you to look up that company and learn about them and have some good questions when they ask you if you have any questions. So you can do that by looking on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, the company's website. And you can also request an informational interview, which is not a job interview, but it's a way for you to define your career and learn more about a company. And that may lead to a future opportunity with that company or another one. Networking's great. People you know, who you know, what they know. Volunteering can be fantastic. That can be a great way to put something on your resume, to learn, meet people, and to actually get back into the workforce, or just to volunteer if that's what you decide is important to you, or have hobbies, whatever, or education, whatever might work for you. And just talking to people just about the job you're interested in, who has that job, what do they do, how has it been a good fit for them, and just staying positive throughout the process. Okay. So you want to create a resume, apply for jobs, schedule some interviews, research the position, and always send a thank you note within 24 hours after an interview, even if it's for a volunteer position. That really is meaningful to employers, and they see that you have compassion and follow through. And then after a week, if you haven't heard anything, it's okay to give a call and say, I haven't heard anything. I was just wanting to know if there's anything else you needed from me. So, so resumes talk about your skills and experience. And then trying to get the next. Okay. So on a resume, you have personal information. You have your name, your address, your education, your experience, schools, and your employment history. And then on a job application, you're going to have that same type of stuff, but then they're going to want to know a little bit more about you, like an email address. Are you eligible to work in the United States? Have you been convicted of a felony within the last 5 years? And it depends on a state law, but that's a common question. Okay, your employment history, similar to the other one. What salary you might be interested in, why you left your last position, and if they have permission to contact your previous employer. And I think I'm at time. And if you have any questions, please unmute your phone line, #6, and I'm happy to answer them.
Hello?
Hello?
Hello, my name is Milton. Can you hear me?
Hi. Hello?
Yeah, hi,
Hello,
I'm Milton.
can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Milton.
Hi. I'm a patient out of Patterson, New Jersey, DeVita at St. Joe's. And I'm interested in going back to work. I have a pretty good resume, and I've been out of work since 2009. I think what scares me most is, like, I have a low vision situation. And that's about the only thing. I'm a double amputee. I lost my feet, but I get around a lot. I still use my prosthetics, and I'm pretty active for an amputee. I was just mostly scared about the vision. I mean, I can see. I still wear my glasses. I take my glasses actually off to read because it's just sharper that way. It's a circulation problem of oxygenated blood to my eyes, but I can still see. And I just glad to hear that you said you had a vision problem and that, you know, you still work and still active. So that's my concern.
Yeah, I work with my eye doctor, and he's been very helpful to me. He writes letters for me sometimes if that's needed. Just with my one eye, I can't pass the driving test at the DMV, or the Division of Motor Vehicles, so he writes a letter so I don't have to take that driving test, saying that I'm still able to drive. So depending, you know, working with your ophthalmologist, it can be really key, and they can be very helpful. He's also very knowledgeable about rights of people that have visual impairment. And then, like at my work, I asked for the large screen computer monitor, which is a very easy accommodation. But there, all those organizations I talked about that work with the visually impaired, if I were you, I would call some of them and see which one you feel you feel comfortable with.
Okay,
and have them give you advice.
Yeah. I do have my license, and that's how I got my license as well. You know, a doctor advocated for me, and when I lost my feet, like a lot of people told me, still keep your license because you could still get cars that would be retrofitted. So that was a big help.
Yeah, and if you contact some of those organizations we've gone over, some of them have funding to do certain things, and you might be surprised. I've had patients be able to get vans with hand controls through different vocational organizations to be able to work and then, you know, drive to their dialysis treatment. So there's a lot of resources out there.
Can you give me some of the names again of the visual places, like the Organization for the Blind or something like that?
Yeah, well, you're going to receive it in the PowerPoint. You'll receive the PowerPoint and everything afterwards. At the end of this, sorry, I'm just going to click ahead a few slides. At the end of the presentation, I put a lot of supplementary resources in for everyone because you're like, maybe she talked about something and it's something I might be interested in. So pretty much most of the organizations I've gone over are at the end of the slide deck when you get it, and it's going to have their links. And then they're all in here. And just if you wanted to look at that, please email me if you don't find it or if you have any questions in particular.
Okay.
But thank you. Good luck to you, and I think you're doing fantastic.
Thank you very much. How do I mute this again?
Hi, my name is Barbara Francois, and I am a social worker at a dialysis clinic.
Yes.
I've been unsuccessful trying to reach a contact person to do like a lobby day here at our office. I was wondering if you have some resources. I know you mentioned the employment network could probably assist me with that, but do you have any other resources that I could possibly reach out to that can come out?
Sure. Yeah. Have you tried your state vocational rehabilitation agency in your community, like looking up who that is and calling that office?
Yes.
So what we did with the Council of Nephrology Social Workers in one area I lived in, we actually asked them to come and talk to a social work meeting. And they were really willing to do that, and that was very helpful. And then a social worker I work with actually had them come out to one of the centers, and we invited social workers from all over the area, regardless of the company they work for, and they came out and talked to a whole bunch of us, and that was very helpful too. And then we had a connection, but we had to call and ask for a supervisor and then ask for someone to come present to the social workers, and that seemed to be a way in.
I'm sorry, who did you say you called?
The Department of Rehabilitation?
Yes, that's who I've been calling, and I've left messages several times, and I have not received not one phone call back or an email back.
Which state are you in?
Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania. Have you asked for a supervisor?
I can't even get through. I've just been leaving messages on the telephone, and I've been coordinating with Andrea Moore. She's the Network 5 representative for vocational rehab, and I've told her my issues with trying to get in contact with anybody over there, and I've been unsuccessful.
So the other thing I've done, just whenever I go to a new community and I'm a social worker there, is I'll pick some field trip days, and I'll actually go to these places. Like I'll go to the Department of Rehabilitation office, and when you go there, they talk to you. Someone talks to you. And then I would, then I leave a card, or I say, may I speak to a supervisor? I'd like to have someone come out and talk to our social work meeting, or a regional meeting. And I think when you go places, sometimes too, to me, like I know where the place is in case I do refer a patient then. And it's harder in person for them to ignore you. But that would be another suggestion. And then also the employment networks. I think they're good. Have them come out. They'll come out. They're very nice.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Good luck. Any other questions?
Hello, Elizabeth. Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Recently, I used to be a driver for the town of Monroe in New York, and I just found out that you can't drive and be on dialysis as a county employee. On top of that, I was involved in a motor vehicle accident at work, and my back is totally thrown out. I still kind of want to work, but I have no idea what I can do with a blown back. And my whole life, I'm 51 years old, my whole life has just been transportation.
So you're looking at what career or what field you might look into now? Is that?
Well, I'm trying to say, if I look to do another career, there's going to have to be a little bit of education involved. Like I said, I'm 51 years old. I'm an old dog. And I don't even know where to start.
Well, you could start. So are you receiving Social Security disability?
Yeah, just started getting payments about a month ago.
Okay, so you could call them and tell them you're thinking about the trial work period, and maybe contact an employer network and just see what they have to offer, or what things they might think your interests are. Also, some of the other resources we've talked about today, maybe like gettinghired.com, that's looking for helps you look for companies that want to hire people with disabilities. That can be very helpful.
What website was that?
Gettinghired.com.
Gettinghired.com. All right, I'm looking at that.
And just when you once you get the presentation, the version of it, like you can look through the slides and kind of decide, are there any other links in here that maybe you could look at. One of them had to do with like looking at things you might be interested in, and then careeronestop.org helps you actually with writing a resume or that type of thing. And then the nationaljobbank.com, you can search jobs by occupation and location.
Nationaljobbank.com. Okay.
Yeah, just some places to start. I mean, there's a lot out there.
Okay, because I want to work, but then I looked at it and I'm like, well, I did put in about 40 years of this 50. So,
right, and if you stay under the standard gainful amount each year, you can work and keep your disability.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, I definitely got to ask about that. All right, National Job Bank. All right, thank you, Elizabeth. You have an awesome day.
Okay.
And just for the I'm sorry. I was just going to say for 2019, you can still earn $2,040 a month and keep your disability for non-blind individuals. So that's pretty generous. So you could probably at least work 1 or 2 days a week and keep your disability.
Oh, see, I didn't know that. $2,040 a month is my cap, huh?
Yeah, and that would be, you know, pre-tax. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. All right. Thank you again, Elizabeth. You have a great day. I'm going to bail and get on this info hunt.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.
Elizabeth, thank you so much for sharing so much in this past hour with everyone. Lots and lots of information, lots of good questions that we've received, and I just want to thank you again for sharing with us today. Very much appreciated.